The night Horizon Air Flight 712 arrived in Denver was colder than anyone expected. Snow drifted across the runway in slow, ghost-like waves as the plane rolled to a stop, its engines whining like something tired but uneasy. Inside the cabin, most passengers were already reaching for their coats, but the 4 flight attendants were still standing near the galley, smiling through exhaustion. Melissa adjusted her scarf. Laura teased Denise about her messy hair, and Rachel leaned against the metal counter, staring out the window at the frozen city lights. None of them knew this would be the last time they ever saw the open sky. The airport felt strangely quiet for a major hub. Loudspeakers echoed through nearly empty terminals, and the air smelled faintly of jet fuel and old coffee. As the women walked through the gate, their heels clicked sharply against the tile, sounding louder than they should have. A few late night travelers glanced at them, unaware they were looking at people who would soon disappear from history. Security cameras captured every step as they passed baggage claim, dragging their rolling suitcases behind them, laughing softly as if nothing in the world could touch them. Outside, a shuttle bus waited to take the crew to the Crestwood Airport Hotel. Snow was already piling up on the sidewalk, covering the city in a heavy, silent blanket. The 4 women climbed aboard, steam rising from their breath as the doors slid shut behind them. Through the fogged-up windows, Denver looked distant and unreal, like a frozen painting. Melissa pulled her coat tighter, saying she couldn't shake the feeling that something felt off, though she laughed it away just seconds later. The ride to the hotel took only 10 minutes, but the mood inside the bus slowly shifted. Their voices grew quieter. The streetlights passed in slow, glowing blurs. When the Crestwood Hotel came into view, its tall, dark structure stood against the snow like a shadow that didn't belong. Built in the early 1900s, it had a grand old look to it, but at night it felt more like a place that had been forgotten by time. Even the driver hesitated before pulling up to the front entrance. Inside the lobby, warm yellow lights reflected off polished floors, but something about the space felt hollow. The front desk clerk barely looked up as the women checked in, sliding them a single keycard for room 6012. The clock on the wall read 9:41 p.m. Their names were written neatly in the hotel logbook, frozen forever on that page. As they stepped toward the elevator, their laughter echoed through the empty lobby, slowly fading as the doors closed, leaving only silence behind. The next morning, sunlight crept through the tall windows of the Crestwood Hotel, but it did nothing to chase away the cold feeling hanging in the air. When the 4 flight attendants failed to board their scheduled airport shuttle, the front desk tried calling room 6112. The phone rang again and again, unanswered. By 9:30 a.m., the hotel manager sent a housekeeper upstairs, annoyed more than worried, unaware she was walking straight into something no one would ever forget. The housekeeper knocked twice, then again, louder. When no one answered, she unlocked the door with her master key. The room looked perfectly normal at first glance. The curtains were half open. The beds were untouched. A suitcase stood upright near the window, and a neatly folded uniform lay on the chair. But the silence was thick, heavy, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl because it feels like something should be there, but isn't. In the bathroom, toothbrushes were lined up beside the sink, still damp. Makeup kits sat open, as if someone had been in the middle of getting ready. A hairdryer lay unplugged on the counter. Nothing suggested the women had packed or left in a hurry. There was no mess, no sign of panic, No broken furniture, just 4 lives frozen in place, as if time itself had stopped inside that room. Police arrived within the hour and sealed off the floor. They tested the windows and confirmed they were locked from the inside. Outside, a fresh layer of snow covered the fire escape, smooth and untouched. Not a single footprint led away from the room. If the women had escaped, they would have had to walk through that snow, but it was as clean as if no one had ever stepped on it at all. Detectives searched every corner, every drawer, every inch of carpet. They even pulled apart the bed frames and checked the ceiling panels, half expecting something impossible to be hiding there. But there was nowhere for 4 grown adults to vanish. The door had not been forced open. No alarms had gone off. The women had simply disappeared, leaving behind a locked room that made no sense, a silent space that felt more like a tomb than a hotel suite. As the investigation dragged on, detectives started looking beyond room 6012 and into the history of the Crestwood Hotel itself. What they found was far more disturbing than they expected. Long before it became a place for tired travelers and airline crews, the building had served as a military medical facility during World War II. Old blueprints revealed hidden service corridors, sealed off storage rooms, and underground passages that never appeared on modern maps. It wasn't just a hotel. It was a building designed to hide things. Local historians told police that wounded soldiers had once been brought here in secret, some too badly hurt to be sent home. Many of them died inside these walls, far from their families, their names lost in paperwork and forgotten files. Over the decades, rumors spread that some bodies were never properly removed. During later renovations, workers had quietly found bones in the basement, only for management to cover it up to avoid scandal. The Crestwood had always carried a dark reputation, but now it felt suddenly very real. Hotel employees began sharing stories they had never dared to say out loud before. One bellhop claimed he often heard footsteps behind walls late at night, slow and dragging, even when the hallways were empty. A front desk clerk said the elevators would sometimes stop on the 6th floor without anyone pressing the button, the doors opening to a silent, dark hallway as if someone invisible were waiting. They all pointed to the same area, near room 6012. One housekeeper broke down during questioning, admitting she once heard muffled crying while cleaning that floor. She followed the sound to the wall between 2 rooms, but when she knocked, the noise suddenly stopped. She reported it, but management told her it was just old pipes. After the 4 flight attendants vanished, she realized with horror that the crying had sounded exactly like a woman begging for help. As more records were uncovered, it became clear that entire sections of the hotel had been sealed off over the decades and simply built over, erased from public view. Rooms had been renumbered, hallways had been shortened. What once existed was now hidden behind drywall and paint. Investigators began to wonder how many forgotten spaces were buried inside the Crestwood, and whether room 6012 was sitting on top of something that was never meant to be found. By 2024, the Crestwood Hotel was no longer the glamorous place it once was. Its carpets were worn thin, its wallpaper peeled at the corners, and the air smelled faintly of dust and age. Renovation crews were hired to gut entire sections of the building, including the long-forgotten 6th floor. For most workers, it was just another job, but for Eddie Morales, something about that hallway felt wrong from the moment he stepped into it. The lights flickered, and the air seemed colder there than anywhere else in the hotel. Late one night, while mopping near room 6012, Eddie heard a soft tapping sound. At first, he thought it was a pipe, or maybe someone working on the other side of the wall. But the sound came again. 3 slow knocks, spaced too evenly to be random. He froze, listening, the hairs on his arms slowly rising. When the knocking stopped, the silence that followed felt even louder, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Eddie leaned closer to the wall, pressing his ear against the cool surface. What he heard next made his stomach twist. It wasn't metal or water. It was a faint, trembling voice, barely more than a whisper. He couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a woman, tired, desperate, and close. The sound faded in and out, as though it were coming from somewhere very far away. Trapped behind layers of concrete and time, he stepped back, his heart pounding, and knocked on the wall himself. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the tapping returned, faster this time, almost frantic. Eddie dropped his mop and backed away, staring at the wall as if it might crack open on its own. He called out, asking if anyone was there, but his voice was swallowed by the empty hallway. The next morning, Eddie told the renovation supervisor what he had heard. Most of the crew laughed it off, but when Eddie brought them to the exact spot and the knocking started again, their smiles vanished. The sound came from inside the wall, not above it, not below it, but deep within, as if something had been sealed away and was finally trying to be heard. The construction crew cut into the wall beside room 6012 with a grinding saw, sending clouds of gray dust into the air. The moment the drywall fell away, a blast of cold, stale air poured out, carrying a smell so old and rotten that several workers stepped back in shock. It was the kind of smell that didn't belong in a hotel. Thick, sour, and unmistakably wrong. Their flashlights cut into the darkness, revealing a narrow passage hidden behind the wall, a space that no blueprint had ever shown. The corridor was barely wide enough for one person to walk through. Its concrete walls were cracked and stained, and the floor was layered with decades of dust. But what made everyone freeze were the objects placed neatly against one side. 4 airline uniforms, faded but still recognizable, folded as if someone had handled them with care. Each uniform had a name stitched on it: Melissa, Laura, Denise, and Rachel. The silence in the hallway was so deep it felt like the building itself was watching them. As the workers moved deeper inside, their flashlights landed on shapes lying at the far end of the passage. 4 human skeletons rested against the wall, slumped in unnatural positions. Some were sitting. One looked as if it had tried to crawl. Bits of hair still clung to the skulls, and fragments of fabric hung from brittle bones. It was immediately clear these people hadn't died peacefully. They had fought for every second of their lives. The walls told a story even worse than the remains. Long scratch marks ran across the concrete, deep and frantic, like someone had clawed at it until their fingers gave out. Broken fingernails were still embedded in the surface, trapped there like frozen screams. Whoever had been locked inside that corridor had realized the truth, that no one was coming, that they had been buried alive behind a fake wall inside a crowded hotel. Forensic teams confirmed the impossible. The skeletons belonged to the 4 flight attendants who vanished in 1989. 35 years had passed, but their final moments were still written into the stone around them. The hidden corridor wasn't just a forgotten space. It was a grave built by human hands, sealed carefully and quietly, hidden in plain sight while thousands of guests slept just feet away. Once the remains were identified, detectives went back to the hotel records from 1989, searching for anyone who had access to the walls, maintenance corridors, and renovation zones at the time. One name kept appearing over and over again: Walter Briggs. He was a quiet, middle-aged maintenance worker who knew the Crestwood better than almost anyone. He had keys to nearly every locked area and was often assigned to fix problems on the 6th floor, including near room 6112. Personnel files showed that Walter had clocked in the night the flight attendants vanished, but never clocked out. 2 days later, his locker was found empty. His uniform was gone. His apartment had been abandoned, with no furniture and no personal belongings left behind, as if he had erased his entire life overnight. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him since that week, and no one remembered him saying goodbye or talking about moving. Even stranger, several coworkers remembered Walter acting nervous in the days before he disappeared. One said he kept glancing over his shoulder while working. Another recalled him muttering about spaces inside the walls and rooms that don't exist anymore. At the time, they thought he was just rambling, but now his words sounded like a warning no one had taken seriously. Investigators compared old blueprints with the newly discovered corridor and realized something terrifying. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the building could have known exactly where to build a fake wall without anyone noticing. Walter had worked on multiple renovations over the years, often sealing off old hallways and creating new rooms. He would have known how to trap someone behind drywall and make it look like the wall had always been there. Police searched for Walter Briggs across the country, but there was no record of him after December 1989. No bank activity, no driver's license renewals, no death certificate. It was as if he had vanished just as completely as the 4 women, leaving behind only a name, a few faded photos, and the horrifying space he had created inside the hotel. While investigators carefully cleared the hidden corridor, they discovered something small tucked behind the remains, half buried in dust and old fabric. It was a cassette tape, its label faded but still legible. Written in shaky ink were 4 words: December 1989, please listen. The tape was fragile, warped by time. Yet somehow it had survived sealed inside the wall for more than 3 decades, waiting for someone to finally press play. When they played it in a quiet evidence room, the first thing they heard was static, then breathing. Shallow, panicked breaths filled the speakers, followed by muffled voices layered on top of each other. The women were whispering, trying not to be heard. Every sound echoed like it was bouncing off concrete. Someone was crying. Someone else kept saying a name over and over, as if repeating it might somehow make the nightmare stop. As the recording continued, the voices grew weaker. One of them begged for water. Another said she could hear footsteps moving just beyond the wall. There were long pauses where no one spoke, only the sound of slow, terrified breathing and something heavy shifting on the other side, like a person standing very still, listening. Near the end of the tape, one voice became clearer than the rest. Melissa's. She spoke in a broken whisper, her words trembling with fear. She said they had tried to break through the wall, but it wouldn't move. She said someone had been there earlier, watching them through a crack before it was sealed shut. Her voice dropped even lower as she admitted she could still hear him moving, even now. The final seconds of the tape were almost unbearable. There was one last quiet knock, as if someone was tapping from the other side of the wall. followed by Melissa's final, shaking words. "He's still here. I can hear him behind the wall." Then the tape clicked, the sound cutting off mid-breath, leaving nothing behind but static and a silence that felt far too alive. The Crestwood Hotel still stands in Denver, polished on the outside and silent on the inside. Room 6112 has never been reopened. No guests are allowed near it, and no one is supposed to step foot on that stretch of hallway after midnight. But employees swear that sometimes, when the lights are low and the building is quiet, faint tapping can still be heard through the walls, slow, deliberate, as if someone is trying to get out. Walter Briggs was never found. No body, no arrest, no grave. It's as if he simply melted into the same darkness he created. And that's what makes this case so terrifying. Because if he could vanish once, there's nothing to prove he didn't come back. The 4 flight attendants were officially laid to rest decades after their disappearance, but their final moments remain sealed inside that hidden corridor, trapped between concrete and silence, a place where screams were swallowed by walls and no one came to help. So the next time you stay in an old hotel, listen carefully, because sometimes the walls are not just holding up the building. Sometimes they're holding something inside.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.